everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 3 of Monster. So, the atmosphere of this series has been kind of crazy so far. I really like it. It's very real, it's very gritty. It doesn't feel like an anime, it feels just like a drama. We were talking in the Discord about this, but it seems like one of those series, like if you were ever going to adapt an anime into a live action series, why haven't we done it with this? This would be perfect because you could adapt it across a lot of different things. But I feel like, there's not been any fantastical elements throughout. It's literally been like there's this creepy ambiance, and there's like, you maybe think that maybe with the twins, there's like something supernatural and weird going on, but we don't know. But yeah, it doesn't have like the traditional anime elements. And so I feel like, why aren't we adapting this? Maybe it's a good thing though. It's supposedly a really good series, so maybe it's good that we've not adapted it. Maybe it's good they've left this one untouched. Watch, as soon as this airs, they'll announce that they're going to adapt it. But no, so I'm really excited about this series. And the last 2 episodes, it feels like it's been a very self-contained story, but we've gotten like Dr. Tenma going through the ringer. Like the last episode, it was just like, oh my God, what more can we do to this man? Well, the people that wronged him are dead now, so the question is, what do we do with this? And is this going to come back to hurt Dr. Tenma? I don't know. It's like he had an alibi, right? He was at home, right, when they died, so surely not. I mean, he couldn't have gone to their places, killed him, and left. There's no way. It's very, very creepy that he wanted them dead, and he told the little boy that, and then they all died. I think that they all got poisoned from the candy that was meant for the little boy. They ate the candy from him, and I'm sure that the director, Heineman, took the candy with him. He didn't leave it for the kid. So I'm thinking they got poisoned. I think that that's how all 3 of them died, because it's just coincidence that all 3 of them died after eating the Werthers. So I guess we're going to find out what's going to happen with them, like if it was intentional and what that means. And what does Tenma do? What does he do in light of this? Because, the director of surgery is now dead. The director of that's dead. How's Eva going to take it? What's going to happen? I don't know. But this series, it's like a slow burn. Like, it's easing you into it. I don't feel like the series has been boring at all. It feels like we've had a lot happen. But it just also feels like it knows that this is the very beginning of the story. Like, we're not very far into the story, and the series knows it. So it's just leading you down a little trail. Like, let's go on a walk and see what happens. I don't know, but it's like, it's right after Halloween as I'm recording this, and like the spooky, scary vibes. This series is like just kind of has a haunting feel to it, which I'm really excited about. It gives you the chills. So let's not waste any more time though. I'm excited to get into episode 3 and see what we get. So we are going to start Monster, episode 3, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So a monster, huh? Roll credits indeed. I was debating bringing White Raccoon out because at first I was like, no, I'm not going to need White Raccoon. However, we do a major time skip in this episode, so it seems kind of warranted that we should maybe line out where everything is before the 9 years and after. 9 years is a long time. A long time. So we went from 1986. We went from 1986 to 1995. And within those 9 years, there has been some things happening, right? So within those 9 years, there's been some things happening. But man, how interesting things turn around, right? Things seem to turn around for Dr. Tenma in the craziest of ways, and in ways that Lunge, he's very much like L from Death Note, only not as Bishonen. He's much more normal, right? He's fascinating. I like Lunge's character. I like his quirkiness where he's typing out, like, this is how he remembers things. He has, like, a photographic memory, it seems like, which is perfect for him as a detective, because he remembers Tenma. Tenma does not remember him. But, of course, Tenma is the most suspicious out of all of this, because he had the most to gain from all three of them dying. The person who took his position, the man who stole it from him, and then this other doctor, yeah, they were all in his way, and now they're magically gone. But he does have an alibi. The one detective knows, he's like, yeah, he was out drinking. He clearly did not do this. But then where does that leave us with the candy? And what do we do there? So we find out that, yeah, basically that's exactly what happened. The candy had nitrates. The candy had nitrates and killed the three of them. Interestingly enough, it's Lunge kind of points out, he's like, this is clearly a possible act of terrorism. It's like, yeah, what Lunge doesn't know is he doesn't know where the candy came from. He doesn't know that it is from the bag that the one doctor opened that was in the boy's room. He doesn't know that. So he is under the assumption that somebody in the hospital gave them candy and they all three died. Who gave him candy? We don't know. And so that's why he suspects Tenma. But it wasn't him. It was clearly somebody. I think that someone sent the bag of candy to kill the kid because he was related to that German family, and then they ended up eating it before the kid did. Okay. I'm trying to see if I can read anything that's on the nightstand there, but there's like a number that he could call. And so Tenma gets up and goes to the door and sees the officers and finds out that they're all dead. And then we have Monster. Like I said, I'm not paying much attention to the OP. I like the sound of it and the visuals, but I'm kind of like, I zone out during the OP because I'm like, I don't want to focus too hard on them because, like I said, I feel like they're contextless spoilers. I don't want to focus too hard on them until we actually see the stuff happen in the episode, which it looks like in the OP Tenma has really long hair, but here he's still clean cut and everything's fine. So I don't want to know. I don't want to know what's going to happen. I want it to be a surprise, even if it's a long journey to get there. But yeah, so of course the press is surrounding this whole thing because it's a high profile case. They're like, well, 3 people died at the same time. Of course it was a murder. I like that I want to have a little like spot here for thematic things. And there's different thematic elements happening in this episode and kind of want to touch base on them. The idea of coincidence versus intent. Because, yeah, that's like everybody's assuming they're like, oh, well, these all happen at the same time. They have to be a murder. It has to be, it's not natural for these things to happen all at once. It's like, well, there's the rule of 3, right? But the fact of it was all a coincidence, seemingly. I mean, it was all an act of them taking candy from a kid and it biting him back. But it wasn't like, as creepy as that boy is, and that boy has been very creepy the last couple episodes, as has the girl. They've both been like the shining creepy and are highly suspicious. As much as that is, I feel like, as creepy as it is, that the deaths of the 3 were all pure coincidence. Like, I don't think the little boy intentionally put nitrate-filled candies in a bag. He was a kid, right? He was, 9 or 10? He was like a 10-year-old kid. No. So I do think it was pure coincidence, but I like that how the press and the people are like, oh no, it was a murder. Like, it couldn't have been just random happenstance. No. And I guess it was if they were poisoned. I guess it's just coincidence that they were poisoned and not the 2 kids. But I like that Tenma just flashes his bag. He's like, I'm a doctor. And he flashes that badge and they're like, oh yeah, you okay, you go. And everybody's freaking out in the hospital. But I like that Tenma, everybody's just standing around not knowing what to do. And it's like, you guys have patience, right? So stuff with Tenma is Tenma and his dedication to duty. He's like, I'm a doctor. He's like, let's save these people. There's nothing we can do for the 3 that died now. We're just standing here while there's people that have serious need. We need to get them. And so then we have the investigator who's like, can you help us out? And he's like, no, I gotta save lives right now. Now's not the time. And he's like, but this initial investigation is vital. He's like, we need to know, did anyone have a grudge against the director and the others? And Tenma's like, well, I did, but I didn't kill him. So that's the crazy thing. He's like, well, I'm the only one that really did. And the officer's like, is something wrong? And he's like, no, nothing's wrong. So yeah, it's crazy that Tenma, like an episode ago, he stood up for his principles. He stood up for his principles. lost everything. And now, while not at fault, he seems suspicious of an act that gave him everything. Yeah. It's just like he had lost it all, but he had accepted it. He humbly accepted the fact that he's like, fine, I'll just be this doctor, this simple doctor. And then in the most crazy turnaround, it's weird, right? Because it almost feels like he was rewarded for being humble. And for it's creepy, right? There's a creepy vibe here because it almost seems like Tenma was rewarded for being humble and just accepting his fate. And then the 3 doctors that were cruel and corrupt, they had their just desserts, and Tenma got everything handed back to him on a silver platter as a reward for him being humble. That's what it seems like. But I say humble, and I want to be loose with that term because we talked about that in the last episode, that when he was lamenting to the boy, there's this concept of pride and the idea of not being wrong. Several characters say that in the series. They're like, oh, I'm not at fault. I'm not wrong. The driver that hit the man, what's his face? We'll get his name here in a little bit, like Lunkers, or Junkers. He hit Junkers. He was like, oh, it's not my fault. It's like, no, it is. You hit him. He did jump out in front of your car, but you did hit him. You share the responsibility. And that's kind of, in the craziest of situations, it's like Tenma has this shared responsibility, and he has a choice. And there's this phrase, I am not wrong, that we see with the driver who hit Junkers. He said that too. He's like, I'm not at fault. It's not my fault. It's like, yeah, no, it is. You had a choice. You could have slammed on the brakes. You just swerved to miss him. It may not have worked, but you hit him. And even if there was nothing you could do, even if there was nothing the guy who hit Junkers could do, he still hit him. So now you're part of it, whether you like it or not. And that seems to be like a thematic element that kind of relates to Tenma as well. Tenma's like, well, he's like, I didn't have a choice. I was the only one that could perform this surgery. Well, no, you weren't. Someone else could have performed the surgery, but you did because you wanted to, because you knew you were the best at it, or that was your belief. So you wanted to have a stake in it. You made a choice. You had a choice to follow orders or not, and you made that choice. And regardless of whether it was uncontrollable, regardless of whether you were trapped and there was no way to not make that decision, the fact of the matter is the decision was still made and people were affected by it. You do share in that responsibility. And so Tenma in the last episode is kind of like, well, no, I'm not wrong. I did everything right. And it's like, yeah, by your standards. And in the director's standards, he was doing what he thought was right. Same with Boyer and them. And it's this really complicated web of, okay, well, you made this choice, and so other people made their choice, and now what do we do with it? And I have a feeling this entire series is going to be a big old web of complicated human decisions and emotions and defining the human condition and what do we do in these crazy situations. And Tenma's just like, gone through the ringer, right? Just been through it. But yeah, it's so fascinating. But here's the thing. The kids are gone. They go to find that damn creepy room 402. I feel like it's a room from The Shining. Like the room in The Shining has a creepy number. I feel like it's the same with room 402. That kid's out of here. He left. He left all the gifts and left. So the kids escaped. The kids are gone. Where did they go? Did someone take them? I don't think they're dead. No. I think they're going to be pretty important to this whole plot because we've spent so much time with them and focused on them already. But where did they go? How'd they get out? Did someone help them get out? Did both of them get out and went to the same place? The boy could have gone one way and the girl could have gone the other. They could be in totally different places. The girl was not in a good mental state. So she could have just wandered outside and wandered away. She was known to do that. She was prone to wander and sleepwalk. So maybe she just walked away. Don't know. And the boy could have just flew the coop too. We don't know. So they're a mystery at this point. But we go to the funeral for Dr. Hyndman, and Eva is just inconsolable. She's just really, really sad. And the thing of it is that she's obviously got the right to grieve. And Tenma goes to comfort her. But he goes to Eva, but then this other guy kneels down to her. The guy that she was hitting on at the party. So yeah. So Tenma, put Eva on here. Eva tries to get back together, and Tenma says no. And I had, now that I'm thinking about it, I had a pretty strong reaction in the episode because I was like, no, bitch, you ain't getting another chance with him. No. But now that I think about it, this whole series so far has been about the consequences of our choices that we make. He did make a conscious choice to leave her. He went to comfort her, and then that other guy came in here, and she's like, I just want my dad back. And so we'll get back to Eva in a minute, but I do like that Becker has become friends with Tenma. So Tenma and Becker are buddies. I do like that. Becker was kind of a sleazy character at the start of the series, but then the more time we spend with him, the more I'm kind of like, no, he's a fine guy. He's just, he's just a little slimy, but there's nothing wrong with him. He's got a good heart, and he's trying to be a wingman for Tenma. He's like, come on, Tenma, I'm trying to be a wingman for you. So I'm trying to think, Tenma's probably in his 30s during the time skip. He was in his late 20s, wasn't he? So he's probably in his late 30s now at this point. So he's still pretty young. Yeah. And so Becker says, Eva, she's now having to live her life as a normal person. Now she's just an ordinary person. It must be a big shock. And Tim was like, you're being a little insensitive. Her dad just died. But Becker makes this comment that she's a normal person now. She was the daughter of the director and all this, had all this set up, and now she's going to have to live a life without all that. But I'm like, well, he probably set it up where she's fine. She's probably well taken care of. I think she seemed like his only child. She's probably got money in the bank. She's going to be fine. She ain't going to go poor anytime soon. So then we get these two detectives. I do like the show is very consistent, whereas the one detective, he had that tie when he was trying to interview the sister of the twins, and it's that really cool, it's a very nice tie. It's got blues and reds and greens in it. It's a very nice tie design. But then we meet Lunge. We meet Inspector Lunge, and he gets a fancy name card and everything. He's like, oh, I've still got a long ways to go. And he's typing it out. And Tim is like, what are you doing? He says, I've got a long way. He's kind of thrown off by it. He's like, do you know where the kids are? And Lunge's like, never mind them. We've determined the cause of death of the director and the other two. So again, I want to point out, again, decisions made, right? Because Lunge, the inspector, they decided not to pursue the kids and instead go with the more high profile case. That they don't really have as much, they don't have any different evidence than what they did for the kids. The only thing they know about is the candy, but they have no other evidence. So him choosing to not pursue the kids case and focus on the directors instead, that's a choice. What consequences will that have? We'll talk about it here soon because I think it has big consequences. And I'm a little bit freaked out by it. So yeah, it's going to be fun. He's like, we found a nitrate type poison in their bodies. And he's like, oh. He's like, a muscle relaxant. He's like, of course, you're knowledgeable. He's like, but how could something like that? And he says it was in candy. And Tim was like, oh, the same wrapper was found beside each body. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so Tenma knows as a doctor, how the nitrates work, but it's clearly, Tenma didn't kill him. And he asks, do you have any idea where the three of them would have gotten that candy? And of course, Tim is like, I have no clue. He's like, I don't know anything about that. He's like, find those kids. What about the search for the twins? And he's like, the BKA has taken over the investigation. And the one detective kind of scoffs at that. He says, don't worry about it. And he kind of scoffs at it. Because he said during the girls' interview, he didn't want them taking over it because he didn't want them to get the clout from the case or whatever. And so he says it could be an act of political terrorism. Those kids might hold a major clue. So he does want to find them, right? But he's just focusing on the other case right now and giving the other one over. Again, a choice. And Tenma says to find them. And so, of course, they point out that Tenma is the most likely to be suspicious because he broke off the engagement with the daughter of the director. He had a grudge against the director. He clearly stood the most to lose in this situation, so he is the most suspicious. But the other detective says he was in a bar drinking at the time of the incident. So he has an alibi. He couldn't have been there when they died. And then I like that he asks, can I ask you why you're typing? Why do you move your hand like that? And he says, oh. He says, I'm typing. He says, what? He says, I'm inputting all the information in the disk in my head. When I press the key to extract the information, not at all. I still have a long ways to go. That's what Dr. Tenma bashfully said when I called him brilliant. So yeah, he's basically got a photographic memory. He just remembers everything. And he uses the typing thing almost like a placebo or a way to get that in there. And I like the detective is like, okay, cool. And so, yeah, then Becker's like, well, do the police suspect you? And he's like, well, I like that Tenma is aware. He's like, yeah, there's enough evidence that, of course, they would suspect me. Why wouldn't they? It's, I'm kind of in an odd place. And Becker's like, oh, well, you shouldn't worry about it. He's like, they interrogated me really hard. He's like, you'll be fine. I just like the way they draw Becker. His eyes, kind of lift up. And he's like, it'll be all right. He kind of just has, a cheeky look to him. And then Tenma says, I'm exhausted. When the dust settles, I think I'll go back to Japan. I came to Germany to do research, but due to the recent chain of events, I feel like I've gone back to saving lives, the true duty of a doctor. So yeah, he came there to do research. So research led him there, but then he found his true duty as a doctor. And he wants to go back to Japan. To go back home. But lo and behold, that's not going to happen. And I feel like Becker's really responsible for spreading the gossip where he's like, you can't leave. But Tenma's just like, I'm tired. He's like, I'm so exhausted. And Becker's like, well, don't be so depressing. He's like, I'm just really tired of being here. But he can't go back home. No rest for the wicked. Because then the one guy's like, oh, I don't want you to go anywhere. He has this rapport with all of these patients. And the patients are like, there's no good doctors here. You have to stay. So, but in a sense, it's like, yeah, you get why you'd want to go home, why you'd want to wash his hands of everything here and go back home to his family. But in the other sense, it's like you want to have this duty as a doctor. You have patients here. They want you to stay here. So Tenma has to make a choice. Do I abandon these people and leave and go home? Or do I stay here where I've made a rapport with all these people? And the guy with just his hand over the top of Tenma's arm, it's like, ugh. And you can see the conflict in Tenma. You can just see how conflicted he is. And the nurse, she says, ever since these 3 doctors have died, the board is going through a whole purge. They're purging all of the director's nepotism, all of his favorable considerations that maybe weren't best for the job. They're like, we're restructuring the hospital. And the nurse is kind of like, please don't leave because it's going to go from bad to worse if you go. They're like, no matter what the chairman says, don't give up. We're all behind you. She's like, please don't leave this hospital. She's like, things are chaos and you're the only anchor we got now. And Tenma's like, how did I get in this position? And then he goes in front of the board and they ask him to become the chief of surgery. And he's like, what? He's like, I'll say it again. I am performance oriented. your appointment to chief is... Yeah, this guy is like, I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to choose people based on their morals or ethics or whatever. He's like, I'm performance oriented. You're the best surgeon here. You are chief of surgery. There, it's done. Like, there's no nepotism, no favoritism, no bribes, nothing. It's just, here's the facts, and you are the best. And then this whole scene of him, like, going down the hallway where he stops. And he just sits there and he's like, what a life. I went against the orders of the director and lost my position, and my engagement was dissolved. And as soon as I decide to work as a simple doctor without any hope of promotion, he slumps against the wall. And then just the way that he kind of like, he cries and he like laughs. He's like, what a life. And he's kind of like laughing and crying at the same time because it's hysterical. He's like, I thought that I was done. He's like, I'd accepted it. I accepted my life as a simple doctor, that there was no chance of me climbing up the ladder. All my dreams and ambitions were dashed. And now it's been handed to me on a silver platter at the cost of these 3 people's lives. And how can you, he's like, what a life. How can you not laugh at that? It's just, it's so, what can you do? And so then he sees Eva. And she's like, I'm sorry for calling you out. So she called him. She called him, right? And I was just like, as soon as she mentioned that she had heard he'd been appointed chief of surgery, I'm like, the only reason you called him out was because you knew he was chief of surgery and you had one last chance to get this life that you've always wanted. Okay. And she's like, no, that's very good. And you can tell Tim was just like, thanks. Like, he's jaded from her. She broke his heart. She broke his heart. And he was like, I loved you. And you tossed that ring down like it was nothing. And now you want to come back? Which, again, it's choice. She asks for forgiveness and a second chance. And he says, nope. Mm-mm. But yeah. And she tries to get him to do stuff for him. And he was like, nope. And he just leaves. He's like, I can't do this. And she says she was wrong, which she was, and she wants to try again, but he's like, no. And I don't blame him. I'd be like, no, you broke my heart, and you revealed what you were after, and you didn't, like, all this time's passed, like, since your dad's death, and you just come around when you hear I've been appointed as chief of surgery? Like, she's jaded him. And you could tell he doesn't like it. You could tell as she's yelling after him that he can't do it. So he buries himself in his work instead. Instead of seeking out that relationship, he buries himself in his work. So 9 years have passed. 9 years. We're 3 episodes in. We've got a time skip already. And so we see Tenma and them like talk about the operation. And the guy's like, okay, if you will. And he's chief of surgery. Make the arrangements. Which he doesn't look that much different. Tenma, for 9 years, he's aged rather well. Especially for being a doctor for 9 years. But yeah, he's probably in his late 30s now. And so they have all the students watching him perform the surgery. So meanwhile, we go inside the city. And they talk about the floods, right? And I like the first thing we see is this like no entry sign. That's like the first thing we see on there. And so there's been all this flooding. All right. Flooding in the city. And it's not the city where the Memorial Hospital is. It's a neighboring city, right? And so from there they say, and this is in Köln. Okay. In the city of Köln. Of Köln, Germany. So this is probably near the hospital, but not too far. And so they say I thought the world would change when the Berlin Wall came down 6 years ago. But nothing good has happened. So it's been 6 years since the Berlin Wall fell. Okay. And East and West Germany were together again. And they're like, with the unification of Europe, hopeless people from all over come flowing in. So they're talking about like immigration and people coming in, making it possibly chaotic. There's been an increase in unexplainable crimes. So they're saying like the immigration is leading to like the crime rate jumping up, and the flooding is not helping matters, right? As they're rowing through, and they're like, Inspector, we've arrived. So they have all like the makeshift pallets and everything. The victims had their throats slit open with a knife. Okay. So we have these two victims with their throats slit with a knife. I don't think the parents of the twins, the dad looked like maybe he had a cut there, but then the wife, we didn't see what she looked like. There was just like blood. But these victims had their throats slit open with a knife. Okay, and their identities, the Reichmans of Stitch Drive. They were murdered in their home. They were believed they were hidden in a closet, and their bodies floated because of the flood. A murder of a middle-aged couple. So yeah, so we have a middle-aged couple. Okay. So we get a profile of our serial murders here. There have been 4 incidents over the past 2 years. So there have been 4 similar cases in the past 2 years. Okay. And Lunge is on the scene, all by the same method. They all had they said they've all had their necks slit. And then they say, well, there's probably robbers who target rich middle-aged couples. And Lunge's like, no, there's too many similarities. It's too soon to call them just robberies. He's like, according to the data, for some reason, all the couples did not have children. Okay, so they had no children and died in the same way. Creepy! All right. He's like, they all did not have children. And he's like, well, this couple certainly did not have any children. He's like, do you think there are too many similarities to call them robberies? And he's like, well, the money and goods were taken from the victims' homes. And Lunge says, all of them totaling very little. So there were stolen goods. Stolen goods, but not much. Not enough to write home about. They're like, nah, it wasn't much to write home about. Just enough to be kind of suspicious, right? He's like, it would make sense if a single perpetrator did it. And so he thinks that there's not just one person involved. He thinks that there's multiple people involved, like maybe an organization or a syndicate. So he's like, it's not just one person. He's like, someone picked the locks to get in. He's like, the security system stuff weren't let off. It was all very hush-hush. So someone was hired to break in, right? Someone was hired to break in, and then the other person came in and killed them. He's like, do you know this man? And then we see Junkers, 32 years old, convicted twice for larceny. His role was to open locks. Okay, so I have my theory. I don't know how, but I don't know. Thematically, the idea of the monster is coming. I don't know. I feel like it's very, the cases of the middle-aged couple with no children, it kind of seems like the couple that were the twins' parents, right? That it was their parents, okay? And that they were killed. But it's like, okay, well, is it the twins? Is the boy, that creepy shot of the boy opening his eyes up when Tenma was talking about him, and Tenma was like, I wish the bastard was dead. I was like, did Tenma just like awaken something in this kid, this monster? I don't know. But I'm like, it's very creepy. I'm like, I don't like it. But I'm like, is it the boy? But then the question is, I don't feel like the girl, is it the girl? Could the girl be the killer? Because she was saying kill back in the hallways. Did she become a serial killer? Like 9 years have passed, and they started 2 years ago. That if these kids were 10 years old, they're 19 now, would have been around the time they were 17. It's plausible, I guess. But that begs the question, like, okay, is the girl the serial killer? Is it the boy? what we do with that. And I only think that too because we cut immediately to this boy with the kite who has a very similar head injury, it seems, to the twin that Tenma saved. And it would be very fascinating if the child that Tenma saved that started this whole thing turned out to be a monster. And he saved him and told him to live no matter what. I don't know. It would be a really cool thematic thing if it did that. We'll see. Maybe it's the sister. Maybe it's not either of them. Maybe the twins are going to be in the story, but not as killers or monsters or anything. They're just, maybe they'll have grown out of their creepiness from the last 2 episodes. I don't know. But you can tell Tenma, what I like about this is that Tenma's in good spirits. And when he goes out to see the kid, and Becker, of course, asking, he's like, how was the girl? And Tenma's like, oh, well, she was a nice person. She was nice. And Becker's like, well, she's the daughter of a director. Like, don't tell me you just had dinner and let her go home. And he's like, oh, well, I had an emergency call, so I had to. And Becker's like, really? He's like, dude. He's like, come on. He's like, you got to rethink that all work and no play doctrine. He's like, you're going to lose a great catch and regret it someday. Yeah, he's like, come on. He's like, you can't just let a girl like that go. Live a little. But Tenma doesn't seem to be bothered. Becker's like, are you listening, Chief of Surgery? I like Becker a lot. He's fun. And then we see that the nurse, she can't get the kite to fly. And then Carl, with his grandpa's kite, he makes it fly. He's like, it could be that it's unbalanced. And of course the nurse is like, can you fly it? And he's like, well, I did when I was in Japan. And then he makes it work. And shows him how to do it. So I love that scene. I love the scene with the kite where Tenma, he relates his family's experience and helps the boy be able to fly it. And he has that little simple moment. And I like that we see the kite flying against the sun. Like, it's very cool. It's interesting. And then Becker's like, oh, this is too schmaltzy and cheesy. He's like, if I were in his shoes, I'd have 5 lovers at least. Becker's like, God. He's like, what a waste. I love it. So then, so he performs the surgery and the people are looking and they're like, what a splendid operation. And they're like, this is how you're done. He's a surgical genius. So we establish again that Tenma is a surgical genius. All right. So then we have Junkers. And Junkers is running from somebody to the point where he's terrified and runs out into the street and gets hit by the car. And again, the guy was like, oh, it's not my fault. And so they take him to the hospital, and Lunge is there. And Lunge is like, hey, this is the locksmith that we need to interrogate. We need to know what's going on. And the doctors there are like, well, we can't really do anything else unless we find a better surgeon. There's one at the nearby hospital. I guess we could get him to help. And Lunge is like, yes, get Tenma in on this. I love that he's like, do you mean Dr. Tenma? I like Lunge's character a lot too. Again, he reminds me of Elle quite a bit. Very quirky, very serious. I'm curious how him and Dr. Tenma's relationship is going to be. He's like a brain surgeon. He presses the hand and activates the memory. Look at him. Look at him go. So Tenma does not remember Lunge. Not at all. And he's like, oh, hey. He's like, you're with the police force, aren't you? And so Tenma's like, Lunge says we need the patient to live. He holds the key to solving a big case. And Tenma's like, look, I don't save patients for the police. I save patients for the patients. He's like, I'm not doing this on your watch. I'm doing this for the patient. And I like that Lunge's like, that's fine. I just need to talk to him afterwards. So the thing about this is that Tenma has the most to lose from this investigation. And the moment that he tells them he doesn't want Lunge talking to him, he doesn't want Lunge talking to Junkers, on the surface, and from our knowledge as the audience, he's doing it because he doesn't want him to get riled up and freaked out, and he thinks that Lunge questioning him will do that. And from Lunge's perspective, it's very much like he's trying to get Lungers to maybe withhold information that could tie back to Tenma. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction that goes now that, Lungers has said that there's a monster there. A monster is coming. The monster's coming. And he just looks terrified. It's like, And I love Tim was like, the monster. Like, what? And that's the episode. So yeah. Yonkers, I'm curious what he's gonna do. Is he gonna freak out? Or is that all he's gonna say and he's gonna pass out and then Tenma's gonna be like, what do I do with this information? What is Lunge gonna do? Because Lunge said that they really hit a brick wall with the murders of the 3 individuals. The candy was the only thing they could find. They couldn't trace it back anywhere because they didn't have the bag, clearly. So what do? What do we do with this case? And what is Tenma going to do? Because it seems like Tenma is getting tied into this as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if Junkers ends up being anything, if we're going to find the twins again and see what they're up to after 9 years, if Lunge and Tenma's a doctor, so I don't think Tenma's going to become a detective. So I'm like, what is Lunge going to do? What is Tenma going to do? I'm assuming Tenma just wants to go back and be a doctor and keep living his life. But how is this whole case going to affect things? So many questions. So many questions, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to wait and find out. We'll see. But I hope you like this reaction discussion. I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. But man, there is a lot of questions I have now, and I don't want spoilers, but I'm very eager to find out how we're going to get those answers. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Monster.